Hello, and thanks for joining us for the Farming Today podcast. I'm Kaz Graham, and in this edition, 7 newly released beavers enjoy a new home and find their bearings in the Northern Highlands. But not everyone's as happy as they are. And the organised crime gangs dumping millions of tonnes of rubbish.
Nobody stops their illegal activity, and even when they are caught, the fines that are imposed are paltry and the sentence is meaningless.
We'll have more from the chair of a highly critical House of Lords inquiry a little later. First, though, sometimes even the tiniest animals can have a huge impact on their surroundings. As part of our week-long look at invasive species, today we're turning to the zebra mussel. They're only fingernail size, but they can do significant damage to our water networks. Ashley Bunning is an aquatic biosecurity officer with South West Water, and he's been talking to our reporter Fiona Clampin at Bude in Cornwall.
So walking along the canal here, we're looking at areas in which mussels might be found. So from our previous surveys, we know that there's a lot more down towards this sea loch. And in particular, a few years ago, we pulled up this chain and it was encrusted with zebra mussels.
Really?
Yes. So over time, hopefully with what we've done, we'll start to see less and less and less once we do our eradication programme. But yes, here we are at the loch, and it's a bit murky today, so we can't really see much.
So what do they look like? I mean, what are you looking for? I can see fish down there.
We've got a couple of examples here.
In boxes?
In boxes. So
not
these
alive?
Are not alive, no. These are old samples that we've got. So they can grow up to 4 centimetres in length. They've got a sort of D-shaped structure, and they've got these characteristics, sort of black stripes zigzag going across the shell itself, which resembles a zebra, I suppose, and that's how they got their name.
Oh, they are really small. You wouldn't think they could do quite so much damage.
No, well, this is the thing. Once they're in a pipework, they will just gather on top of each other and just keep making that gap in the pipe smaller and smaller and smaller, so they can be a real issue. I'm doing some pH testing on the canal here, and what we would like to see for our eradication programme is slightly get more alkaline the closer we get to the sea loch itself. And that's that done.
I kind of think mussels, actually they'd be quite nice to eat, but they are an invasive species.
So they're a non-native species. They originate from the Baltic sort of regions, and they believed to have come over in the timber trade back in the 1800s. They're filter feeders, so I wouldn't recommend eating them. And yeah, they're invasive species. They can outcompete other native mussels, so they can populate sort of spawning areas for the native swan mussel and cause issues. What we're planning to do is, first of all, assess the flow and see how the water moves through the canal, and then make a natural solution with barley straw extract or something like that and put it in the canal, and that will set it slightly more acidic. So then these zebra mussels, when they reproduce, the villagers won't form a shell, and then the adults that are in here will die off over time.
What kind of effect will that have on other species here?
We've got records of what animals live in the canal, so fish species, invertebrates, that sort of thing, and we've looked at their sort of range of what they can tolerate, and they'll all be fine. And what we've got here is there's a lot of mussels in this lower part of the canal. There's still 1.5 miles of canal further up that's not going to be touched, so if they become discomforted, shall we say, which I really don't think they will, they can move up the canal and go to other territories.
So what you're doing here is very much a preventative measure rather than letting them get too invasive and then have to have a bigger bill later on.
Exactly. What we try and do in the southwest, we haven't got many of the big nasties, say, that is elsewhere in the UK, so we focus heavily on stopping them getting in, because once they're in, it's very costly, and with aquatic invasives, once they are in, you rarely get rid of them, so it's a hard task.
Ashley Bunning from South West Water in Bude in Cornwall. Well, from an invasive species to a native one that was hunted to extinction some 400 years ago. But since 2009, beavers have been slowly reappearing in the UK, reintroduced by wildlife and conservation charities. In Scotland, the government's tree planting agency is getting involved too. Last Friday, Forestry and Land Scotland, working with the charity Trees for Life, relocated 7 beavers into the Glen Affric National Nature Reserve north of Loch Ness. These releases can be divisive. So what is being done to placate the concerns of worried farmers? Richard Baines was in Glen Affric to see the release.
So the first beaver has come out. It's the size of a medium-sized dog. and it's nosing down to the water. And it's in.
This pair is from an area in Perthshire where it was deemed that a licence had to be issued so that they were removed.
Roisin Campbell-Palmer from the Beaver Trust charity traps problem animals around Tayside where they live in large numbers for reintroduction programmes.
They were damming agricultural ditches, and we know in very low-lying, flat, drained landscape in parts of Tayside that's not always beneficial for beavers to remain. As you can see, we're in a stunning loch. There's lots of woodland all the way around it, and it's great habitat for beavers, and I think they'll be very, very happy here.
A short while later, a family of 5 beavers, including kits, was released higher up the Glen. This is the first release north of the Great Glen and one of only a handful outside the existing legal range of beavers. But farmers near here have been concerned that the beavers will spread into their agricultural land below the loch and damage flood defences. The architects of the reintroduction were among the invited crowd here to see it happen. Alex MacLeod is Regional Manager for Forestry and Land Scotland. Why is a tree planting agency introducing animals that eat trees?
Conservation is hugely important to Forestry and Land Scotland, and bringing beavers here to Glen Affric is great in terms of as soon as they're released in here, they'll be up the burns, they're going to be creating small dams, they're going to be digging channels, and they're going to be diversifying this habitat. We'll see hopefully an increase in things like dragonflies, we'll see benefits for fish and otters, plant life increase and benefits for birds and mammals, and the work that the beavers do will help sequester carbon. We've taken quite a lot of time over the past 2 and 3 years to consult with stakeholders. Not everyone supports what's happening here today, and FLS is going to set up and chair a beaver monitoring and mitigation group. People can early on raise any concerns and issues. There'll come a point, hopefully in the years ahead, where beavers within the Affric landscape just become natural and very much integral.
Steve Micklewright is the Chief Executive of Trees for Life, which has been collaborating with Forestry and Land Scotland on this release.
There's been a split in the community about the return of beavers. So some farmers who have ground by the river here are worried that beavers could make farming more difficult. There's been a lot of opposition. Politicians have got involved in that as well. But 2/3 of the people that live here do support the return of beavers. And we've set up everything that we possibly can do to make sure that if there are ever any problems, we can deal with it quickly. So hopefully everyone will feel comfortable about this release soon.
So it has been farmers that have been objecting. What can they expect to see?
Well, interestingly, beavers are already in Strathglass, which is the area people are worried about. They've been there for at least 15 years and there's never been a problem so far. But what beavers can do in exceptional circumstances is undermine riverbanks and open up areas for flooding, and that's what people are worried about. With Forestry and Land Scotland and Nature Scot, Trees for Life is working to ensure that if there was ever a problem, we can deal with it so that beavers and humans can survive and coexist together.
2 more beaver families are expected to be released here in the near future.
That report from Richard Baines in Glen Affric. Multiple failures from the Environment Agency, a lack of interest from police and a woeful lack of successful convictions. That's what a House of Lords committee has found in its inquiry into waste crime. The inquiry from the Cross-Party Environment and Climate Change Committee, published today, says that more than 38 million tonnes of illegal waste is being dumped each year, often by organised crime groups involved in drugs, firearms, money laundering and modern slavery, posing a serious environmental risk. One of the examples of dumping highlighted by the committee is Hodeswood in Kent. Well, it's a story we've covered several times, and this angry resident who didn't want to be named for fear of reprisals described the scale of damage to this site of special scientific interest back in March last year.
There's 4 or 5 football pitches, some places as deep as 25 feet, full of processed landfill waste in a designated and legally protected SSSI. I'm astounded. The very presence of a digger preparing the way in a designated SSSI should have triggered an immediate response.
Well, Baroness Sheehan is the chair of the committee that led this inquiry into waste crime.
There were reports made by the public repeatedly that were not acted upon, and the agencies who were dealing with them were passing them amongst themselves. It was a bit of a sort of merry-go-round or buck passing. The scale of the issues that we were dealing with, 38 million tonnes of waste are illegally managed every year.
There are 6 specific sites, including Hodes Wood, that we've just been hearing about. You want investigated. Do you think the public has been let down?
Yes, I do. Taking the example of Hodes Wood, residents there, in January 2020, when the first lorries came to do the tree felling, and that was 4 acres of tree felling. And bear in mind that this is a triple SI site. Residents reported this to the Environment Agency, to the police, to the local authority, to Natural England too, I believe, and the Forestry Commission, and not one of them did anything about it, which I think was really extremely shocking.
You're very critical of the Environment Agency's response to waste crime. And you say that it's difficult not to conclude that incompetence is a factor. Where is the Environment Agency failing?
Reports that it receives from the members of the public seem to be ignored. Secondly, we were told the Environment Agency has the powers it needs to be able to tackle waste crime, but it doesn't use them. They can impose far higher penalties than they do. As soon as they identify there's an illegal site, they can issue stop notices, but that doesn't happen. And we couldn't get to the bottom of why. And the third, I think, very major failing is that they seem not to have the ability to see a successful prosecution to the end, where a meaningful sentence is meted out to criminals.
The Environment Agency might well argue that it doesn't have adequate funding to carry out its role here.
I think funding was something that they raised. However, we had a number of examples where misallocation of resources by the Environment Agency was surprising, shall we say.
Many people will go to the police if they perceive illegal dumping. How well are the police doing?
The police were absolutely unimpressive, shall we say. Our committee really wanted to hear from the National Crime Agency, the National Police Chiefs Council, the National College of Policing. All 3 organisations turned us down. They said they did not have anyone with sufficient knowledge of the issue to come before the committee, which just beggars belief. 35% of waste crime that's committed in this country is believed to be through serious organised crime groups because it's low risk and high profit. They seem to be able to operate in broad daylight with impunity. Nobody stops their illegal activity. And even when they are caught, the fines that are imposed are paltry and the sentence is meaningless.
What action do you want the government to take?
I think we want the government to really take it seriously. It's clear that they're not, to issue prison sentences that are meaningful. Our major call is for a root and branch inquiry into the way waste crime is responded to by the Environment Agency. And in particular, we want them to look into the case of Hodes Wood.
That's Baroness Sheehan. Well, the Environment Agency told us last year alone, our dedicated teams shut down 462 illegal waste sites and prevented nearly 34,000 tonnes of waste being illegally exported, showing that we can make real change despite the challenges involved. A spokesperson for DEFRA said this government is taking action to clean up Britain and tackle waste gangs. We will carefully consider the recommendations of this report and will respond in due course. And that's all we've time for today. I'm Kaz Graham. The producer is Rebecca Rooney, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.